Paul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've always told people I have no idea how I got into this industry, but this guy called and I was looking for a job, and here you are. You and I are talking now 20 some years. It's been what? It's been 27 years, 28
Yeah,
years. And honestly, it's probably been the best thing. I've learned nothing but amazing things from you. And I've always admired, looked up to you in so many ways. And I'm so glad to have you here. But before I dive too deep, I'd love for you to tell people a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and really what you do.
sure. Thanks for that. Thanks for the kind words. My name's Paul Grady. I'm the president of a company called Crucial Data Solutions. We're a software and engineering company in the eClinical market space. We've been in business for about 15 years. By trade, I am a software and database developer, and we try to push the technology envelope within that industry. So, make a long story short, I've been doing it my whole life. About 40 years I've been in this industry. Sam, I came across you and saw incredible talent, a real entrepreneurial spirit, and we've been really good buddies. For your audience, I attended with Sam's wedding, and it was an outstanding evening. So,
Yeah,
anyway, and
thank you.
yeah, thanks for your friendship. It's always been very important to me.
Likewise. I remember when you told me about the first time you got into this industry, you developed a small software. Tell us a little bit more about that. How did you get into that first software you developed and the experience around that?
I had just graduated from college, and I had a friend who was an experienced biotech executive. He had worked for Medtronic and SciMed, and at that time I lived in Minneapolis, and which is really the hub of medical device companies. And he felt as though these companies needed clinical data, and there'd be a real need for it. And this was way back in 1982. Okay. And so we developed a homegrown database. This was before you had open source databases and database servers, and really well before the internet. And so we developed a homegrown database that ran on Windows, and it collected clinical data. And we would go and try to sell that. And we would always get the what do we want with clinical data sort of thing. And since then, obviously, clinical data has become very important for outcomes analysis, clinical trials, any sorts of research that are being done. And as the internet came about and really innovative software companies came around, like Oracle and some of these other big database companies, clinical data really did move to the forefront. And now it literally is the type of data that's being collected in this industry. And I'm still in it, still doing it
Still grinding every single day, right?
every day.
Hmm. You and I did some amazing things. We developed tctmd.com, developed post-market studies for sites. As we walk that path, fast forward to where we are today, compliance remains to be one of the biggest problems in the industry. Quite frankly, I didn't understand what compliance even meant back then. But now, as I sit here and I've been diving that deep into patient data, we live and we breathe nothing but compliance. I'd love to hear from you, your perspective now, where you are with TrialKit and Crucial Data Solutions, all the studies that you guys develop. How do you guys view compliance? How do you go after, how do you improve patient compliance?
Yeah, that's a deep question. A great question. Crucial Data Solutions is a software tool. TrialKit is a software tool, if you will. It allows researchers to build and manage their own clinical research studies, and they can be run on any major platform in the world natively. So there is that. As far as compliance is concerned, there's a number of components and settings within the software that allow you to be compliant. But compliance is a very broad term. A lot of people talk about Part 11, which is FDA regulatory compliance. But it's not like the FDA laid out a set of rules and said, here's what you do. And if you do that, we'll certify you as being compliant. What the FDA did, which is typical of governments, is they set out a series of guidelines. Okay, and of course, guidelines with SAM, as you well know, are subject to interpretation. And so one company's compliance may not be the same as another company's compliance. And so as you break into this industry, and like I said, I've done it since the very beginning, one of the very necessary steps, particularly with larger companies, is that you go through an audit to determine whether or not your product is actually regulatory compliant. There's also other regulatory bodies located all over the world, and their compliance is different than US compliance. So compliance is huge. There's people, that's all they do is compliance consulting. And so I am not a compliance expert by any stretch. However, our software and our SOPs, work instructions, quality management system, a good portion of that surrounds compliance and how we are compliant. And as we come out of audits, generally speaking, auditors will find very minor things just because they have to. But it's been a decade since there's been any sort of major finding insofar as compliance with TrialKit. But yeah, that's compliance according to an engineer.
Yeah, yeah. Compliance is, to your point, it is very broad depending on who we speak to, right? And you and I might view it a little bit different, right? Software patients might talk to a lawyer and they might view compliance from an even completely different angle. So it's been very interesting. But as we look at patient data, one thing that always comes about, which is who owns patient data? I would assume from your perspective as a software, you guys don't really care. You're just providing the software and you guys go fight it out yourselves, right? Or
No,
how else do you guys handle that?
that's a great question. In our various privacy policy and software licenses, we make it very clear we do not own the data and we have no access rights to the data. And if we were to join a study, we would need written permission from the sponsor of the study in order to do that. It is not our data. Having said that, I do have my own opinions about patient data. And it's my opinion that we could greatly reduce the cost of research if the participant owned the data. And then we could reuse the data. Oftentimes with a clinical trial, you'll get a big company, let's say it's company X, I'm not going to name any companies, and they'll do a 5-year trial and they'll collect 5 years of extremely high quality data. Okay, that data gets put into a vault and literally never used again. And if it is used again, it's within that company and within that company only. That data could be reused across the entire industry. In addition, that data is all about the patient. Okay. And that's why I believe the patient should own the data. That's just my opinion. And then that data becomes an asset for the patient. If you want to build a data set of patient data around some sort of clinical indication or something to that order, what you would do is you would negotiate with the patients, if you will, get them to free up their data. They would be compensated in some way, shape, or form, and you could build your data set as opposed to starting a clinical trial, running it for 2 or 3 years, spending $100 million. You could literally be doing certain trials probably within a day as opposed to multiple years. Think of what that would do to the cost of clinical research. So we've really taken a look at that. It's a tough nut to crack. It's not something a small company like us can do. We can't do that. It's got to be it's got to be the government stepping in and saying, okay, all that data that you're collecting, the patient owns that. But we have created technology through the blockchain and through things like smart contracts, where if you did want to build a data set, we could automate the entire process. The participants get paid, the researcher gets their data sets, okay, and it's all done seamlessly. The technology is available today, but it's a question of these big biotech companies understanding they don't own the data that the patient does. And like you said, they're going to have to fight it out. We're too small to do something like that.
Yeah, and even quite frankly, even pharma companies, they haven't even cracked that nut yet with all the money and everything. And you hear about a lot of litigations that's happening because of exactly that. So I do agree. It's a tough one to crack for anyone. The government must step in. But everyone will have their own opinion for sure. Can we talk a little bit more about study builds? We one time I was at a conference, I was at a bar, and then we're talking about like ECOA's diaries, patient data, and this guy sitting next to me, he had a smaller company, and he's, why does it cost so much? What? $50 for a patient diary? $30? And I was like, man, like $120 even sometimes. And he was arguing with me about why does it cost so much? We talked about licensing of the diaries or COAs, etc. We talked about the development time, the hosting, and all this stuff. But as you sit with all the studies that you've built, what has been an example of a complex study and why some of those complex studies, it's time, money, and effort, and it's not as simple as just pulling up an Excel spreadsheet and collecting patient data.
No, these systems are highly specialized. The market is fairly narrow. Okay, it's not like Excel where literally every industry in the world takes advantage of that and the market size is gigantic. So the volume of sales in Excel allow you to decrease the price. Okay, couple that with the fact that this industry is based on big companies that are willing to pay a lot of money to other companies that have established themselves as the leaders. I'm not going to name any companies again, but those companies that have established themselves, they have very cushy relationships with big pharma, big biotech, and it's not even a question. They don't even look at other technologies. And because of that, they're able to really jack up the price, and they do. I know that TrialKit compared to certain systems within the industry is literally pennies on the dollar, and our technology could be as much as 10 years ahead of theirs. It's better, yet not ever a consideration for big pharma. And that will drive up the price. I would like to say to you, don't blame us. Okay, right now, I think TrialKit is the most affordable system. We're probably the fastest growing system in the industry. We've greatly reduced our prices. We've never raised capital, so we're good at pinching pennies. I don't have offices in downtown San Francisco or downtown Manhattan. We use cloud data centers from Google and Amazon Web Services that even further reduces the costs. Our engineering team is located all over the world. That even further reduces the costs. And we pass all those savings on to the client. And we don't nickel and dime you to death. You don't buy Excel and say, gee whiz, I want to create a new sheet on a new tab. And Microsoft says, that'll be another $300. Okay. And that's the same with TrialKit. If you say, hey, I want to add 10 new sites, or I need to add 40 new case report forms, or I need a new version, or I want to do 2 more diaries, just do it. Okay. We don't charge you for any of that. There's no upcharging using TrialKit, but the market is still very narrow. Okay. There's just not enough volume out there for prices to ever come down to what you would find in Microsoft 365 or Google Apps or something to that order.
So you talked about ahead of the curve by 10 years. So let's talk innovation for a minute. How do you see innovation looking at the industry as a whole? What actually in the last 20 years, for example, or even 10 years, what has been innovative that came into the industry? Where does your lens go?
Sure. The first piece of innovation in technology, just in general, occurred way back, I'm going to say in the late 70s, and that was the microprocessor became mainstream and it became affordable. Okay. And that changed all of technology. Okay. Literally everything you do is microprocessor driven. The microprocessor, therefore, led to the next huge innovation, which was the internet. Okay. Now, data can be acquired, it can be stored anywhere in the world, it's entirely decentralized. And because of that, we're doing things that we could never do before. Databases used to reside on your mainframe, and you had to have a direct connection to it or something. When PCs came along, toy databases were put onto them as well, that sort of thing. But the internet changed all the rules for that. The next big innovation was mobile technology, in my opinion. Now, everybody in their pocket 24/7, 365 in the civilized world has a very powerful computer. Okay, we used to be restricted to desktop computers, then laptops. Now those phones that you're using, they're much more powerful than Cray supercomputers were 20 years ago. Okay, so that was another huge innovation. But probably the biggest innovation that has come around in the history of technology is AI. And AI is changing everything. A lot of people don't understand AI, and so they go about developing it, in my opinion, the wrong way. Let me just define what AI is. AI is an entity that combines all the intelligence of everybody in the entire world into a single entity, okay, and then some. It's actually smarter than that. And one of the things that we've developed is we're able to simulate clinical research by using AI as a quote virtual God, small g. Don't want to insult anybody here, small g. And that virtual God is able to create virtual participants. Those participants could be virtual humans, they could be virtual animals, it makes no difference. We feed the protocol and all sorts of other information about whatever the drug or device or treatment is, whatever the indication or the disease is that we're studying, into AI. And AI is able to actually create virtual participants, run 10-year studies in less than a day, in less than a single day. This is virtual data. How accurate is the data? I can't really tell you that right now. It's very accurate. It's incredibly impressive. We did a COVID antibody study way in the beginning of COVID. You had to take a LabCorp test, and it measured your level of antibodies. We compared natural immunity to vaccine immunity. Okay. And the differences were pretty stark. Vaccine immunity antibodies were through the roof, whereas natural immunity were much more moderate. So, just as an example, if you had natural immunity, your antibody levels were probably around 1200. Your vaccine immunity, your antibody levels were greater than 25,000. I couldn't even measure them, okay, for a number of people. All right, so we kind of closed off that study. And several years later, we decided we're going to simulate it. Okay, the numbers that are coming out of our AI simulation are almost identical to our patient population. Okay, because AI is that smart. It understands all that. It understands how diseases progress. It also understands how various treatments can offset that disease progression. And it builds it into the data, and it can create this data in a hurry. And so we're actually simulating clinical trials with virtual participants today. We have an MD on staff, and we have charged him with the arduous task of basically put your reputation on the line. Tell us how good is our AI participants compared to human participants. And so that is something that he's working on. Stay tuned on that. We're only a couple of years into simulated studies and maybe 5 years into AI, but it's advancing unbelievably fast. The old study validation, I'm sure you've done a number of study validations where you got to run 100 participants through, check all your case report forms. AI does that now in an hour. It used to take several people months to get that done. AI
You've
analytics.
created so you've created a digital twin within your platform,
I don't
right?
like calling it that. I don't think that's accurate. We've created a digital participant. There's no twin. Okay.
Is
I know
it?
a number of companies are working on twins because they're underestimating the intelligence of AI.
Yeah,
They're believing AI has to learn from a real human, okay, before it can project progression, treatment, indication, that sort of thing. Okay. Our take on that is AI is smart enough to do that already. It doesn't need a digital twin.
it's
Okay.
powerful.
It's an
You get all the
intelligence.
data.
And that's why we call it God with a little g. If you talk about God with a big G, that's an intelligence, that's a presence that humans will never understand. We just simply can't. It's so
That's
far
true.
above us that it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
AI is pushing that. And I'm not saying it's some sort of deity or anything like that. I'm just saying it's an intelligence that we don't quite understand yet. And it's getting smarter. Okay.
Where are you getting the data from to run that? Is it your own data or you're letting AI create its own patients, its own data?
AI understands TrialKit's all of TrialKit's data structures. That was the first thing we did. We took a Gemini platform and we built our own proprietary data model out of Gemini. That data model has learned all of TrialKit, how we store absolutely everything. It came in with, again, more knowledge than everybody in the world combined, as I had already said. That's what it came to the table with. Now it understands how TrialKit works. If you think about what is a protocol to most people is some document that defines a clinical trial or a clinical study. That's a woefully inadequate protocol. The real protocol is what's in TrialKit. It's got everything. Every case report form, every edit check, every visit schedule, every diary. I can go on and on, all documented in tremendous detail. And AI understands all of that. Where is it getting the data from? It's getting it from its basic understanding of how TrialKit stores things. We ask it to create data for a participant, and we allow it to create a highly diverse population, okay, which is something that is really important in clinical research. You can't, people are so diverse culturally, racially, gender wise, that you absolutely have to test these sorts of treatments on a diverse population. AI can do that in its sleep. Okay, so where's it getting the data? It's generating it based on a very intimate knowledge of the protocol because it understands TrialKit.
That's brilliant. That's really brilliant. I am definitely staying tuned for that to see what's next. Paul, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Before we close it, I always ask the question at the end, which is not knowing who's going to be my next guest, what would be the one question you would ask that person? However, before answering that, the question that I have for you from someone else, not knowing who you are, is what is it the one thing you wake up in the morning thinking of?
Okay, I'm an engineer by trade. The one thing I do before I go to bed is set up what I want to do the next morning. When I wake up, I am already on that. Okay, I set my goals in the morning or in the evening. I achieve them through the next day. At the end of the day, I usually take some time to myself and set new goals. And that's 7 days a week. You want to start a company, and as you well know, my friend, you want to start a company, be prepared to work. Okay, I don't remember the last day I took off. It's been decades.
Yeah, I feel your pain.
Exactly, exactly. Or
What is,
pleasure.
thank you.
I tell my employees, don't feel sorry for me. This is what I want to be doing. Okay, this is what I want to be doing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this.
Exactly.
What would be the one question that you would ask the next person coming on?
Not having any idea who that person is. Well, you got me on that one. That's a
It's
good
got to
one.
be something.
Truly, I don't know. I'd have to think that one through. Let me just think. Your previous guest, that was a very good question. I don't want to copy that, but
Yeah,
what is it you wake up and I could turn it around? What do you think of just before you go to bed? That's about the best I can come up with.
yeah. No, sounds good.
Or how about this? What are your priorities in life? Okay. You take the religious man, it's God, family, work. You take the workaholic, that order may not be the same.
Yeah,
Okay.
true.
What are your priorities in life? That would be a very good question.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here, your friendship, everything we do. And thank you once again.
Sam, always a pleasure.
Likewise.
I look forward to talking with you soon.
Perfect.
Take care, my friend.